Everybody's freezer should be full of these. What are these? This is tomato sauce. I've portioned mine out into 16-ounce packets. They're flat, they don't take up much space, and I've always got tomato sauce ready to go for pizza, calzones, gnocchi, bolognese, or even if I want to put a few of these into a pot and then like cook some meatballs. Tomato, basil, garlic, T.B.G. Real simple. This is not, I'm not going to regale you with the story about my grandmother's tomato sauce. No, we're going restaurant style with something that we can adapt to just about anything that you might need tomato sauce for. So I did have a little Italian grandmother who always had a pot of tomato sauce cooking on the stove. Seemed like it. But it was full of sausage and meatballs and chicken legs. So it was more of a meal in itself. That's not what we're doing. We're making tomato sauce that we can use across lots of different recipes. We're making T.B.G, tomato, basil, garlic kind of tomato sauce. Should be pretty neutral. Consistency, you're going to have some flexibility here in how you want to adjust that to suit your preference. This past summer, we yielded so many tomatoes out of our garden. Like, oh my God. I made so much tomato sauce. I yielded about 7 gallons of tomato sauce by the end of processing all of our tomato harvest. And I canned it in 32-ounce jars. It was just too much to like cryo back into freezer portions. It just made more sense to me. And then it was easier to not have to cool it. So just, jar, pressure canner, it's easy. So somehow we're out of tomato sauce 6 months later. But I guess if you have pizza once a week, that'll happen. So we need more tomato sauce, but it's not the end of the summer and I don't have a giant tomato harvest, so I have 2 choices. One, I buy organic vine-ripe tomatoes from Costco, which are actually pretty cheap, and these ones looked really nice. They were bright red, they were ripe, about as nice as a vine-ripe tomato would look. Because generally they're grown across the world, they're shipped, they're picked kind of green, and then they're ripened as they ship. So I chose vine ripe. You could go with some number 10 cans of San Marzano style plum tomatoes, which are peeled, but they're not seeded, so you still have to seed them. So I have the vine ripe. That's the route I'm taking. And it's going to be some work, so if you're doing this, you might as well get a lot of tomatoes to make it worth the effort. We're going to concasse them. We're going to peel them, we're going to seed them, we're going to chop them. And that's where we're starting here. So get a pot of water on the stove so it's ready when you're ready. And then we're going to start coring out these tomatoes. And I'm using a little serrated paring knife. I love this thing. It's great for just about everything in the kitchen. I have 5 or 6 of them, so there's always one clean. And you can be pretty generous with how deep you score, because inside the tomato, the heart, we'll call it the heart, can be kind of tough and fibrous, and won't necessarily break down super nice if you're doing a rustic kind of sauce. So you can score it, you can core it pretty deep, and then we're gonna score them. And when I score them, we're just cutting through the skin, just through the skin, not through like the fruit, through the meat of the tomato. And I'm going pretty far from like 9 to 3 and 12 to 6. Instead of making just little tiny crosshatch at the top, I want it to just be easy to peel these things. Now, get all these cored and scored, and then you're gonna scald them in the boiling water that's on the stove. And how many can you put in there? Well, kind of as many as you want. I put quite a few in here, up to the limit of overflowing my pot. And I'm not worried about overcooking these tomatoes. And as long as you start with boiling water, it should be hot enough to get that skin, that jacket to pop off. And it'll take about 45 seconds, and you'll see them, just even looking in the pot, you'll see them start to open up a little bit, corners of skin start to peel back. We don't want to go. We're not trying to cook the tomatoes, we're just trying to release the skin. So whatever time that takes. If you're just doing a few, I don't know why you would, but 30 seconds or so, or if you're doing a big pot like this, these probably took about 45 seconds. And I'm not gonna shock them because they're gonna be tomato sauce. If you were using concassate tomatoes for a different application, you would probably wanna shock them so you stop the cooking process. So you have really nice, beautiful concassate petals. We're making tomato sauce. So I'm not shocking them, I'm just gonna put them back onto a sheet tray and then just do another batch. Bring the water back up to a boil. It's gotta be rolling, it's gotta be hot, because the tomatoes are gonna kill some of the temperature of the water. All right, our tomatoes, they are scalded and they're on this tray. And we're gonna go through all these and peel the skins off. A little paring knife is good just to give you a little grip. And you're gonna peel the skin off and you're gonna cut them in half. And however you're comfortable cutting them in half. I'm not too worried about cutting towards my hand with this little serrated paring knife. But whatever's good. If you want to set it down and cut them in half, or peel them all and then cut them in half, whatever works for your brain. And after they're all peeled and they're all cut in half, then we'll go through and seed them all. And to seed them, we want to remove not just the seeds in the inside, but maybe some of that, like, you know, if you think of an orange where it all comes, you cut it in half crosswise and it looks like a star inside, a tomato is the same. You might want to pull out some of that like center piece where everything comes together. Because again, that can be tough, like the part that we cored out initially. So, you know, you can kind of see me pulling out some of these central pieces of the tomato. We'll call it the tomato heart, pulling the tomato hearts out. And then we're going to discard the seeds, the skin, all of that. There'll be a bunch of liquid in the bowl with the seeds. We don't need it. If you try and strain it and save it, you are going to have so much liquid in your tomato sauce, it's going to take forever for it to all evaporate off. So don't worry about it, you can toss it. Assembly line, just kind of blowing through one step at a time. Now that these are all seeded, we have two choices. We can go for a really smooth sauce and just puree these halves of tomatoes in a Vitamix, in like a high-speed blender, and have like a really smooth end result that's just kind of ready to go at the end. So that's a choice. You could also go in a food processor now and create maybe a slightly rougher texture. You know, from the beginning, by pureeing these halves. The other option is to chop them like this. And chopping them, you just want like kind of a relatively similar sized chopped tomato. And these are probably maybe half-inch dice. So you can blow through all these, chop them all up, and our tomatoes are ready. So this is kind of like the bulk of the work, is concussing the tomatoes. Doing the blender method or doing like the food processor method makes things way easier. So your call. If you want something really rustic and you want chunky tomato sauce, go with the chopped method. You can also do your processing into whatever consistency you want at the end. But be aware that if you use your Vitamix to process a cooked tomato sauce with all the garlic that's going to be in there, you risk having a Vitamix pitcher that makes your strawberry smoothies taste like garlic strawberry smoothies. So use at your own risk. The bowl for the food processor never seems to hold garlic flavor or onion flavor. So I don't know, something to do with the plastic, I guess. Anyway, pot, maybe 3 or 4 tablespoons of olive oil here. And for my 7 pounds, I've got about 7 pounds. I weighed these guys of peeled and seeded tomatoes. I've got about 1/3 of a cup of garlic, chopped very fine. Chop your garlic up real fine, and in your end product, it's going to look like you've got tomato seeds again, but it's your garlic. We took the seeds out because they can make it taste bitter. We took the skin out because it will be plasticky no matter how fine you puree it. So, it'll look like there's seeds in there, but we know we took them out. Now, browning the garlic, we're going to do this over kind of a medium-ish, lowish heat. Because we want to have light golden brown color. If you go too dark, it's going to have like a really roasty caramelized garlic flavor, which is not really what I'm going for here. If you go too light and you don't get good color in your garlic, it's going to have like kind of a raw, funky garlic kind of flavor to it. We're looking to have like this nice light golden brown. So once you get here, kill the fire because there's going to be residual heat in your pot. And then we're going to put in about 2 ounces of tomato paste, or maybe like 4 or 5 tablespoons here. No, I used a whole little can. I did. Yep, I used a whole little, is it a 4-ounce can? Yeah, a little 4-ounce can, little tiny little, I ended up using the whole thing for my 7 pounds of tomatoes. What am I talking about? And we want to mix it into the oil and into the garlic and get it kind of combined here, and then we'll turn the heat back on and kind of toast it up a little bit, cook off a little bit of the moisture in the tomato paste, and from there it's easy. We're going to put our tomatoes in, so all the chopped tomatoes in, give it some salt. We want to get some salt in the beginning to help develop some flavor. It's hard to get it to taste nice and smooth and round if you try and salt it all at the end, because it's just going to taste like salt as you're tasting it, and it's never going to be quite right. So you can probably get a good tablespoon of salt in now, and then you want to mix it all up real good, get the tomato paste dispersed into the tomatoes, get the salt dispersed, and we're bringing it up to a boil. And we're bringing it up, we're going to get it going, get it rolling. Use your wooden spoon or silicone spoon and kind of break things up and stir it around. And then we want to cover it and turn it down real low. And my sauce took about 3.5 hours on this day. And it was rolling at about this speed. So you can see how slow this is going. This is kind of what you're looking for in this neighborhood. We want the tomatoes to completely break down. We want them to be cooked all the way through. And we also want to be going at a speed where we don't have to worry about the bottom burning. Tomatoes love to burn on the bottom of a pot, so be aware of what's going on here. So after you bring it up and you turn it down and you think you've hit the speed that is going to be looking like this and cruising nice and slow, come back in like 7 minutes and take a look and just double check and make sure that it's not like increasing in speed because you covered it and you're trapping more of that heat. So if you check it in 7 minutes and it's looking nice and gentle, cruising, simmering, you're good. And then you can come by every 20 minutes and give it a stir. Scrape down the sides, scrape the bottom, make sure it's not burning. So we're cooking this covered, right? Not a lot of evaporation happening. There's quite a bit of moisture in the tomatoes, and the tomato paste will add some thickening to the sauce. But after, let's say, if you're doing about 7 pounds of tomatoes, after about a couple hours, you can uncover it and taste it, see how's the flavor. Do we need more salt? Add some salt now, and mix it in there real good. And you can kind of leave it uncovered and adjust your consistency here and have a little bit of evaporation happening, reduction. Now, once it's cooked and you've hit the consistency you want, so here's what I've got. This looks kind of thick, but I'm gonna process it at the end here. And when I go to do that, it's gonna end up thinner. So I'm going in a food processor because I'm not scared of the garlic in the food processor. Wait a second, let's back up. We almost skipped something. The basil, T.B.G, right? We got the T and the G, we need the B. So once you get to the point where you like the consistency, it's been cooking for like 2 or 3 hours and the flavor's good, the tomatoes are all tender and they're breaking down and kind of incorporating, we're gonna turn it off and we're gonna cool it for a little bit. As we're cooling it, we're gonna put a bundle of basil in here. So I'm gonna take about 5 or 6 good-sized sprigs of basil, I'm gonna fold them up, and then I'm gonna tie them up with some butcher's twine. Just wrap them 5 or 6 times, tie it with a couple granny knots, and we'll drop this bundle into the sauce. Stir it around, get it in there. We want it to release all those aromatic basil oils into the sauce. And by doing this with it tied up, we don't have to worry about having any of those black basil leaves in the sauce later. And since, what's the other option? Chop the basil? No, you don't put chopped basil in tomato sauce. It'd be terrible. Then you have black specks everywhere. So a bundle is a good way to do this. If you want to add a little parsley to it or a couple sprigs of marjoram or oregano, that's an option too. But we're making T.B.G right now, and I'm just going with B. So let it cool for an hour or so with the basil, and then we can remove it, kind of squeeze out some of the sauce and whatever juices it has absorbed. And then we can process it now that it's a little cooler. You don't want to go hot sauce into a food processor, English. And it's just safer this way. So we'll process it. You can use the food processor to kind of like hit a consistency that's maybe rustic, a little less rustic than what was in the pot. You can go the Vitamix, the high-speed blender, and make it much smoother. This is really up to you. And then from here, you can ice it down the rest of the way. And since we made a big batch of sauce, you got to cryovac it or you've got to can it, whatever you want to do. Canning's great if you're doing a big batch. I like these I portion them into 16 ounces, so 2 cups of tomato sauce into like a little, and then flat pack them. They don't take up any space in the freezer, and I know that that's the right amount of sauce for me to do 5 pizzas and then have some left over to make the kids pepperoni, pizza, sourdough sandwiches some point the next few days after doing pizza. So you can decide how you want to portion it. 16-ounce portions are pretty manageable. I mean, if you were to buy a jar of sauce at the store, it's going to be 32 ounces, so it's like half a jar of sauce. And now you're done. This is a project that will consume a lot of your day. But then you have tomato sauce in your freezer ready to go whenever you want to make pizza or pasta or pick a thing that requires tomato sauce. It's never going to go to waste. And if you have leftovers from when you defrosted some, you can use it for, I mean, maybe a quick lunch where you're cooking some ground beef with some peppers and a little bit of tomato sauce and I don't know, what are you making? You have some pasta? Like, it always gets used, never goes in the trash. So that's it. This is a really simple, straightforward tomato sauce. It's going to take some time, but it's worth the effort. And then you have, money in the bank, so to speak, with all this stuff, all this tomato sauce in the freezer.